What was it that made Cary Grant so appealing for so many years? Sure, his looks didn't hurt, nor the accent that was his alone. But what may have made him the movie's longest-running romantic lead was really a series of subtle contradictions. Surrounded by wealth and elegance, he was irreverent, like a man of the people just pretending to be an aristocrat, exactly what he was, in fact. And his most seductive, Cary Grant's chief weapon was a sense of the absurd. We may be falling in love, he seemed to say with a wink, but I know just how silly we're acting. But most of all, we respond to the mixture of lighthearted fun and a darker side to his nature, lurking just below the surface. That's why he seemed as mysterious as the goddesses he played opposite. That restless quality may also explain why his private life, all 5 marriages worth, was never as smooth as his on-screen presence implied. So here now, with all his charm and all his complexity, is Cary Grant, leading man.
He was an original. In the history of motion pictures, no one, before or since, has seemed quite as debonair, as sophisticated, and yet with it all, as human. For over 30 years, he was Hollywood's most sought-after leading man, acknowledged as one of its truly great comedians. He was the star everyone loved. He was also the star few really knew. His name was Cary Grant.
I remember him mostly, and I think most people do, as a person who lights up a room.
Women adored him. They loved looking at him, they loved listening to him, and they loved watching him in action.
The most striking thing about Cary is how fantastically good-looking he was.
He was such an attractive man that people presumed, well, maybe he doesn't have very much depth.
People who knew him terribly well said that there were great storms going on inside.
He needed desperately, I think, not only to be liked, that was something else, but for him to be approved of.
He had to make you love him. That was very important to him.
Bristol, England, today. There still stand the places he knew as a child, the street on which he was born, the school he attended, and most important, the theater that became his entranceway to the world.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen.
He was born January 18, 1904, Archibald Alexander Leach.
His mother was overpossessive in his very young days. A few years earlier, she had had another son who died shortly before his first birthday. It was said that she never got over that shock.
Like many Victorians, Archie's mother was class conscious. Elsie Leach felt she had married beneath her. Her husband, Elias, worked hard as a pants presser and was rarely home. Pampered and immaculately dressed, Archie was the center of Elsie's life. But that would suddenly end. He was only 10 years old when he came home from school one day to find his mother gone.
His father had her committed to a local mental hospital where she remained for the next 21 years. He was told she was gone for a rest, she would be back, but it was all very vague. And he was then left with all these self-doubts as to whether he had been the cause of it, why had his mother walked out on him. It was to have I feel, a profound effect on him for most of his life.
He rarely saw his father and often went to the Bristol docks and dreamed of running off as a cabin boy. He joined the Boy Scouts and was later remembered as a loner who always looked neglected. Archie was 14 when he was expelled for the childish prank of peeking into the girls' bathroom. It marked the end of his formal education.
He was hauled in front of the entire school. It was cruel, to say the least.
But Archie was a survivor. And a chance visit backstage to Bristol's Hippodrome Theatre would change his life.
Hello, love. Lonely? Please yourself. Do you feel like a bit of company? And you?
It was like nothing he believed possible. The lights, the music. Archie got a job calling actors to the stage. It was magical. He saw the men and women who emerged from these dressing rooms transformed before an audience into performers. They were cheered, applauded, adored. It was an experience Archie would never forget, and he was hooked. Within weeks, Archie became a member of Pender's Knockabout Comedians, learning the art of pratfalls, stilt walking, pleasing an audience. Archie had found himself a new family. In 2 years, the Pender troupe would be on its way to perform in New York City, and 16-year-old Archie would be with them. New York was a far cry from Bristol, England. The jazz age was being born, and Archie reveled in it. When the Pender lads headed for home, Archie decided he had nothing to go back to. His chance for a future was here, and he was going to make the most of it. When he couldn't find a job on stage, he survived by walking stilts in Coney Island to advertise the Steeplechase amusement park.
He told me he was very poor and he used to sell ties on the sidewalk on Broadway out of a suitcase, and he was forever looking for the police. And if he saw a cop, he would quickly close the suitcase and run.
I had written a skit for vaudeville, and I needed a very, very handsome man to carry out the plot. And he came in, and my partner said, oh, we saw him already, and he isn't any good for us. He has a Cockney accent, and he has a very peculiar walk, and no acting experience whatsoever. And I said, well, it doesn't make any difference to me. He's the only really good-looking man who's come in the last week. And I just fell madly in love with him.
He was handsome, imposing, young blade around Broadway. He'd been on the road for the Schuberts in several musicals. He was always around looking for work.
In 1929, he managed to get a screen test from Paramount Pictures. He was rejected. The reason? Bow legs and what was described as a thick neck. Archie refused to accept that verdict.
Oh, boy, what a great day to have good eyesight.
This short, Singapore Sue, made in New York City, was the start of one of the great screen careers of all time.
Hello, Judy. Sure, I'll buy a doll. A singer for me. And here it is. And a beautiful Chinese girl for you. Now, how about a kiss for the both of us?
It was 1931. Archie Leach was 27 years old and determined to succeed. He drove to Hollywood with all his possessions crammed into his first Packard and soon got another screen test. This time, Paramount gave him a contract, and with it, a new name. Archie Leach would be no more. He was now Cary Grant.
Biography's profile of Cary Grant will continue here on A&E.